Joining us live from his home studio in Los Angeles, California, the creator of maybe the central document in our entire business, at least on the non-union side. Please welcome David Toback, creator of the GVAA Rate Guide. David, thanks so much for taking time to be with us this afternoon.
Oh, thanks, Paul. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I just said to you off mic, we've met, we've
hmm
interacted a little bit, but essentially we're strangers, and that'll change in the next 15, 20 minutes or so. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the GVAA rate guide because one of the things that fascinated me about the rate guide is, I know creative freelancers and entrepreneurs in other disciplines, right? Coders, graphic designers, you name it. And writers, social media strategists, right?
hmm
Nobody, to my knowledge, has a document in their business such as the GVAA. And obviously, I'll throw in the SAG after rate guide, but union is a bit of a separate deal here for
hmm
non-union talent. And in many of those disciplines, unions don't even exist. But where they're out fending for themselves,
hmm
they don't have anything like the GVAA. How did the sheer idea for the GVAA rate guide come up?
By accident. So, kind
Really?
of like a lot of great things in life just happen. Sometimes they just fall into place. They just happen. This is one of those things. I call it my post-it note moment. And for those that don't know, and maybe you may not know either, Paul, but post-it notes were created because the company failed at making a super glue, and they found that it kept sticking. It kept re-sticking, and somebody thought the brilliant idea of putting that onto little pieces of paper that they could stick on, and they made a lot more money with post-it notes than they would have with super glue, because like post-it notes are like Kleenex, right? It's like the brand name is the name of the product. And the same thing happened with the rate guide. Basically, in the first year of my career, I was being mentored. I become fast friends with Christina Malizia, who is the GVAA founder and owner. She's now off in animation world, killing it as Poison Ivy and in the Casablancas and all these shows and stuff. And so,
Yeah.
she's not a fixture of the GVAA, so a lot of people may not realize that name, but she started it, and we became fast friends. She became a mentor, and I took like a class with GVAA, and all of a sudden I booked a job through Craigslist. And so they're like, "What are your rates?" And I was like, "I don't know. You're supposed to tell me, right?" Like, I had an agent at the time, which the rates were told to you, right? You never had to figure it out. And I was so early into my career, I was just stumbling through it and like, "Oh, let me go market." And I feel like this still happens to this day. Everybody puts the work before the learning in a lot of ways, like trying to get the work. Um, and I just didn't know any better. And so I was like, oh crap, what do I do? What do I charge? I don't know. What is this? And it was like a 2-minute video or something like that. I charged them like $200. And I was an analyst in my previous life, marketing and a financial analyst. And I was like, oh man, I got to figure out what my prices are. Like, I'm got to be the only dumbass who doesn't know what to charge. So I got that information that she gave me. I went out and found I used some other rate sources that were alive at the time. And I just put together a guide for myself, of the available information I had. It was very small. I think I had commercial, I had radio and TV, and it wasn't really any digital then. Now I feel like I'm an old a VO vet now, and there was no digital.
Back in
Um,
my
yeah,
day.
before in the odd 2000s. So I was like, let me just put this together. I think I had some e-learning maybe and some narration or something like that. And maybe four sections or something like that. Kind of similar to what it looks like now. But, and I sent it over to Christina, like, hey, look what I made. And she was like, lost her mind. She's like, oh my God, like we need this in the industry. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, we don't have anything like this. I was like, well, you mean nobody knows how to charge? And I was like dumbfounded. I'm like, I thought I was the only idiot. But it wound up being that this was a problem within voiceover because that was handled by the union, and not non-union. I don't know how they've done it all these years. I guess people just did what they did, what they got. And I think as the internet took over is when that really started to make a big difference where people could go out and get their own work very easily. I always say this, if you're non-union and you're going after business, you have to be your own agent. So now you have to understand the business from that perspective, not just being a creative talent. So kind of circling back, Christina was like, will you help me out? I think we need this. Like, would you help me create this? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I joined forces with her. We got a bunch of top coaches that are still top names in the industry now, production companies that had worked, agents, casting directors, kind of everyone got in the room, contributed rates, top talent as well, top grossing earning talent in the business, and what were the rates that they were getting, and we came together with rates that were suitable for that, agents thought were good, that there were current e-learning and narration rates that people were getting. And so we got all the kind of pros of those fields to chime in. And so that really gave us a good base of, professional standard rates that we could rely on, that pros were getting, and that the main industry, that's what rates that people were getting. We released it at VO Atlanta 2016, I believe, if my
Okay.
memory serves right. And the rest is history. It like blew up, shot up like a rocket ship. Like people lost their minds. They were thought it was amazing, and it was just like, oh, like I didn't really understand the scale of it. It just
Yeah.
kind of was like,
Yeah.
hey, I like helping people. I like if I see a problem, I want to solve it. And so I was just like, oh yeah, let's do this. This will be great. Like I love helping, giving, and now we're here.
Not to cut you off,
No, go
but
ahead.
so now that we know the history and the sort of the origin story
Yeah.
of the rate guide, what to me one of the biggest failings we have is that was 2016. It's now, as you and I talk, it's 2023. It's 7 years later,
Hmm.
right? And to me, one of our biggest failings is 7 years on there are still like it's staggering to me how many people getting into the business aren't immediately made aware of the GVAA rate guide. So for those that are not aware,
Hmm.
let's say you've been a voice actor and I've known some that, in this business for a year to 2 to 3 that still don't know about the rate guide.
Yeah.
Tell us, what is the GVAA rate guide and why should talent use it?
Super. So the GVA rate guide is a rate resource of industry average rates that professional voice talent should aspire to get. It is a guide, it's a resource. We always say everyone's business is their business, and this is not a union contract. This is not a standard rate that we are calling a standard. These are rates that we find as average rates that are in the industry that can fluctuate. And it's there to help people understand their value and what, as a voice actor, what their value of the service that they're providing is. And because voiceover is so varied in the genres and how those are approached and what they are and what the value that they bring is, it gets very complicated. And this is why we have agents. So, when you have commercial broadcast, that rate is different because the company is getting value. They're using your voice to sell and make money. Whereas if you're doing an internal narration for a company's training video that's 5 minutes long, they're not getting any benefit out of that outside of informing their clients, their internal people, whatever it is. So you have e-learning, super long form, mostly very long form narration based. What are the rates going to be for that? Like not everything is a singular per minute, per hour type of thing that we're kind of accustomed to outside of the creative endeavor. So it's really used to help people educate people to understand their business, understand rates, and help them understand the value that they do bring so they can have confidence when they're doing their business that they are the pro and that the rates that they're asking for, that they command them, that they understand why they command them, not just at some rate, and that they can feel good about it, because a lot of people, especially artists, have trouble charging people. And so those things are very normal. I think especially in this endeavor where booking is very hard to come by, validation is next to none. So that kind of, it can be hard for people to stand up to their value and command, like, no, I just can't do that, you know and that's what the rate guide and what I teach and coach within rates is all about, because the end of the day, like, there's so many other factors out there that are gonna bring rates down, the industry to different levels. You know, I've seen it, you've seen it recently, I've seen it change multiple times. There's always gonna be something, but there's always us, and so if we're running our business, we get to choose who we work with, who we accept to work with, and we can always say no, and that's what the rate guide the purpose is. One of the purposes to help people to understand their value and be able to walk away from jobs that don't serve them and serve the community, because as we quote people and do jobs for them, that teaches those people what rates are. and,
Exactly. I've
and
said
so
many times
yeah,
we get what we tolerate, right?
exactly, yep.
And the two things that I think the GVAA has or possesses, I'm not even sure how to articulate it, but the two things that stand out to me and did immediately was it's objective. In other words, every voice actor is not fending for themselves and having to pull rates out of, somewhere where the sun doesn't shine.
Hmm.
And number two, you can bank on the fact that they're reasonable, right? Because there's a research component to this, there's a consortium component to this. A lot of people got together from across the industry and not just voice talent
Yeah,
to be able to put these guides together.
yep.
Let's talk about from this point moving forward, David. How often, and I've noticed, for example, even in the last couple of years, there have been some additions and some changes to the guide over time. How often are rates revisited? I know last year, the year before, you added automotive rates for the first time, and they're still in the guide. So, what is that process like where you sort of reevaluate what the guide is now and how it needs to evolve?
Cool. That's a good question. It's timely, as we're going to be doing a large scale review of the rate guide, as we're working on some other exciting things. There's no timetable. There's no structure to it. We did like a big kind of broadcast revisit when we added digital broadcast. So there's no real. It's not updated often, and that's also good because we don't want rates to be volatile. You know, we don't want them to be going up and down, like, "Oh, we're gonna update these every year." And then we go to do it, and it's like, "Well, we don't wanna lower commercial rates or."
What if you had done that in the middle of the pandemic for advertising rates when advertising cratered for 6 months, right? That would have made no sense. So I totally get where you're coming
'Cause
from
it
there.
can't be market based, it needs to be, value based. And
Right.
there is an argument that sometimes the market will change and rates may come down to that, and so though that could be something where there's a big shift in where things are being done.
So, one of the complaints about our business, David, and I think this is fairly universal, and especially from new clients that maybe haven't worked with professional voiceover people in the past,
Mhm.
certainly for new talent, and heck, even for experienced talent, it can be really confusing. We've got a multitude of different genres, we've got pricing tiers, we've
Mhm.
got local, regional, national, and broadcast, right? There's all this stuff to learn.
Don't forget in perpetuity.
Right, in perpetuity versus not in
Yeah.
perpetuity. Uh, so the question becomes, as an industry, should we explore how we can simplify this like crazy complex rate structure that we have, which seems to be pretty unique to each genre? Does that make sense? Does that not make sense? And if so, my God, how do we proceed with that?
I understand it, but I don't think it makes sense because it leaves too much on the table, and this is what a lot of people want outside of voiceover. They want, "Oh, well, what's your per minute rate?" I think you could simplify it by non-broadcast. You could do pretty much anything in non-broadcast using corporate narration rates outside of
Right.
e-learning.
I've often said, David, that being new, simply being new, is not an excuse to charge really subpar rates. That if you're trained and you can deliver the goods, then you should be charging pro rates. In other words, GVAA rates. Do you agree? And if you disagree, why?
I absolutely 1000% agree. I was like, "You must have heard me say that." Maybe you have. Yeah, no, I say that all the time. If you're good enough to book the job, you're good enough for the professional rate. If Coca-Cola thinks you're good enough to market to sell their product, you're good enough to get paid for selling their product. There's no resume involved. They're not like, "Oh, yeah, send over his credentials and his experience level so we can determine the rate,"
Yeah, so who
that
is he trained with?
yeah, we need to verify that, that's just not how it works in our business.
Right.
There's no resume. There's no looking at your qualifications. Your qualifications are how you performed on the audition.
You don't get a discount on your Southwest Airlines flight because you had a first year pilot, right?
Yeah,
David, I want to thank you for your time today. Before
sure.
you go, though, I want to ask you if you can share what might be on the roadmap for the GVAA and you started to get into this with the international
Mhm.
expansion of the guide. Is there anything else you can tell us about where the GVAA rate guide may be headed?
We're gonna be adding some more things. We're gonna be looking at, different podcast, rates, as podcasts have, blown up. Podcasts aren't just for talking heads anymore. There's a lot of different mediums. People are narrating full stop. They're doing company shows, like, they are doing the podcast for them as a voice actor. We're gonna address some more areas like that. There's some other, like we said, the international, I think we're gonna revisit everything. We wanna look into digital a little bit more now. It's difficult because digital doesn't the way we have it set up is the same way terrestrial is done, which nothing's terrestrial anymore. It's all digital, but so TV, radio, and then digital broadcast, but it's all 3, 6, 1 year term, and digital doesn't it can operate that way, but it doesn't. Right now, digital is treated like TV. Like, you don't care what channel it's going on. It's just that
Right.
it's in broadcast, and so that's the way the digital was. But there's a lot of pushback on, like, social media boosted posts, where the rates just aren't there. So
Right.
it's a potential that that just doesn't command as much because of the type of ad buy, that is. So, and then in GVA ourselves, we just have, like I said, we're working on a bunch of stuff. We're gonna have some cool things for our recorded content coming out, industry firsts, I think, and so we're excited to at some point get that out. We're all we're not I don't work full time for GVA, kind of like 25, 30 a week, but we're we're a very, very small team, so we're working on getting those things. That things take a lot longer for us to get done, but we're working on it, and it's a lot of big changes for the year, so there's a lot of things coming in store for this year.
From non-union voice actors everywhere, David, thank you for the work that you and the GVAA do on behalf of us. I think we owe a huge debt of gratitude to an idea that came up mostly by accident, and just because you needed a rate guide, and it turned into this beautiful, beautiful thing for the industry.
Yeah.
David Toback, the creator of the GVAA rate guide. David, thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it. It's been fun, and look forward to seeing you again.